This podcast may contain graphic and/or explicit content that may not be suitable for some listeners, especially kids like me. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to the Real Life Podcast, brought to you by the Thin Blue Line for Women. In this podcast, we open up and talk about real life issues as they relate to first responders. It's raw, it's real, and it's about time. I'm Tamara, your host. Thanks for joining me. Before we get into Leah's actual interview, I talked to her briefly about what's going on with this COVID-19 crisis and how to lower our stress and anxiety levels. So let's listen to this first from her, and then we'll go into her interview.
Hello?
Hi, Leah. I just wanted to ask you what people can do in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis to maybe lower their stress and anxiety during this time.
Yes, I think one of the best things is just to avoid excessive media coverage. If you're going to watch the news and the media, make sure it's from a source that gives you facts and doesn't hype everything up, and shut it off and go back to it the next day, a few hours later. What have you. And then also just to think about the things that you can control. Don't start thinking about what if or hypotheticals. Just what can you control? You can wash your hands, you can do hand sanitizer, you can stay away from large crowds. So just remember the stuff that you can control, work on that, and try not to hype things up in your mind.
Okay, so that's all good advice, but I'm not one to stress easy about things like that. But when I went to the store again this weekend, and then again today, because I'm kind of worried, the store shelves were actually almost out of food. And that kind of got me freaking out a little bit. So I bought extra food this morning because I don't want to have to go there next week and not have food on the shelf. So I was a little worried about that.
Yes, and that's important it is worrisome to everybody that we're out of things in the stores, but it's just important to also keep those connections, because you never know, your neighbor might have something that you might need. Even though we're not going to maybe not be in contact with each other personally, make phone calls, FaceTime, talk to people. Okay, I have this many rolls of toilet paper, I have this much hand sanitizer, this much in my pantry. Right. And let's just see how much we can give to each other and swap and whatever. If it's not in the stores, then reach out to your friends and family.
Now, what about taking care of our children? Because, I do have a daughter here, and, I want to watch the news and I want to stay informed, but should we limit the amount? I know you said earlier to limit the amount, but I want to stay, on top of things as well. Mm-hmm. So how do I go about doing that? And how do families do that when they have kids in the house and now it's spring break and schools are closed? Mm-hmm. How do we watch the news and not let them see and not stress out in front of them?
I think, especially if you have a smartphone or a tablet of some sort, maybe not broadcast it on the TV, but go to your own personal space and maybe click on a link and read it, and then they can't hear it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so then you're just getting the information, the children aren't. Go on a computer or whatever you might have and maybe read an article instead of having it blast throughout the room.
Yeah, because it's a little crazy. I know kids, they act how, they look at their parents and people that they live with for how they should feel,
Yeah.
And they can sense stress levels. And I'm actually stressed right now, just a little bit, it's kind of crazy. So, okay, well, thank you. I really appreciate your time again with this COVID-19 crisis. And we're going to go right into your episode now. So thank you so much, Leah.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Today I am interviewing a licensed mental health counselor, Leah Demarest, and she is from Ohio. And we're going to talk today about post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and trauma. Hi, how are you, Leah?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be a good interview. We're going to have a lot of deep conversations about PTSD and anxiety and trauma and things like that. So to open us up, why don't you give the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I am licensed mental health counselor and as well as a certified alcohol and drug addiction counselor. I specialize in trauma and PTSD, anxiety, depression, and addiction. And I have a private practice here in Urbandale, Iowa.
Nice. Now, is this something that you've always wanted to do? How long have you been doing it?
I have been doing this since 2016. I had earned my license in 2015.
Okay.
But yeah, I've always worked in the social services. Psychology has always been a thing for me. I've enjoyed it.
What type of degree do you have to have in Iowa to be a licensed mental health counselor?
So you have to have a master's degree. Mine is in clinical psychology. There's a lot of master's degree levels that are just psychology. So.
Oh, okay. So what's the training like then? After you get your master's degree, do you have to have a certain number of hours in that state?
Yes.
Like volunteer hours?
Yeah. So you get your master's degree, and it actually depends on your school on what type of practicum you do, if you have to do a thesis and things like that. And then you do have to do internships. After you receive your master's, then you go on and you have to do 3 years of training.
Wow, 3 years. Is that full time, like 8 hours a day? Or
Yeah, so you're full time. And so it's chopped up into different hours. You have to have so many hours of direct client time, so many hours of supervision, so many hours of paperwork and all that stuff. So it adds up to 3 years, but you can do it like you can do 12 hours a day, whatever you can fit in.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you specialize in? I mean, you just said PTSD, anxiety, and trauma, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're a drug and addiction counselor, which a lot of our first responders go through.
Yes.
So everything you just listed is pretty much what our first responders deal with.
Yep. And I also teach the OWI classes. So when you operate while intoxicated, you have to go through a 12-hour course in order to get your license back. So I do that as well.
Oh, okay.
Once a month on the weekends. Yeah.
OWI. I've never heard of that before.
It's the same as DUI.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. In Iowa, we call OWI.
Gotcha. And what are the different counseling models, if you can run down those kind of briefly for us?
Well, there's actually just so many of them. But ones off the top of my head, like cognitive behavioral therapy, play therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, person-centered, art therapy, existential. Cognitive behavioral, CBT, is one where you challenge the cognitive distortions, which is basically the negative thoughts in your head. You try to improve their emotion regulation. It helps a lot with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and addiction. A lot of counselors that treat those use CBT. DBT, which is the dialectical behavior, it's a type of CBT. With that one, you just identify strengths, you build on them. A lot of people with borderline that work with borderline individuals. Mm-hmm. And then existential, that one is you confront like negative thoughts rather than the external forces around you rather than your environment. That one works a lot with addictions and eating disorders and things.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's interesting how different models help different problems.
Yeah.
So how do you know which one to use with which with which person that comes in your office? Is it?
So it's just kind of every person's different. So every treatment is different for each person. So you could be one person coming in with PTSD, and then the next person comes in with PTSD, but you could be treated completely different. So it just kind of depends on what your challenges are, what symptoms you're presenting, and what your goal is for treatment, what you want out of treatment, and then we can go from there. I typically, with the trauma, PTSD, those types of things, I usually use CBT for that. So
and that's the cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yep, and that's one where we challenge the negative thoughts in our brain, and we try to improve our emotion regulation. So a lot of anger management, things like that.
Gotcha. Is that a lot of self-talk?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, trying to look towards the positive in your day. I always tell my clients, try to find one positive thing in your day. It could be the crappiest day ever, but there's always one positive thing. It might have been you found a nickel in the change machine, or something really small. There was a lot of sunlight today rather than cloudiness. Something small. Just find it.
That's funny because on my Twitter page and my Facebook page is Thin Blue Line for Women. I often will in the morning write that. I'll say, okay, everyone name one positive thing about themselves, not even about the day. I just say about themselves. And it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Have you treated any first responders? Well, that you know of, firemen?
I have. Yeah. So I've treated a lot of military actually, and police officers, mainly in addiction. Mm-hmm. There's just so much prevalence in addiction for first responders.
And we're talking all kinds of addiction, like drugs.
Food, drugs, alcohol. Yeah.
Even food, right?
Yep. Porn.
Spending money, any kind of addiction.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm going to get deep here because I want to know what in the world causes somebody to get addicted. I'm not talking about drugs and alcohol. I understand how, your body gets addicted to the drug and even the alcohol, but like, how does a person's mind or body or emotions or whatever get addicted to something? What, can you explain that?
So we can actually start out being born more able to get addicted than other people. So if we maybe we were exposed to a drug as a child, maybe we had trauma as a baby. If our parents or anyone close to us were addicted or chose a lot of alcohol, those types of things can predispose us to also become addicts, because that is the way that we've seen other people cope. So then we, in turn, through modeling, go towards that as well.
So that's not like only hereditary in their body or molecular makeup. That's them visualizing, like seeing something happen, behaviors.
Yes. So it's in your environment, and it can also be your brain can be predisposed because if you are not wired, I'm trying to do layman's terms.
Right. Yeah, please do. For all of us.
Wired, like, so if your neurons are not connecting, so a lot of people that may have a mental illness, they're not throwing that serotonin around in their brain. The feel-good chemicals are not being shot in their brain at the appropriate times. So a lot of people that have that issue, they tend to shoot towards any type of addiction because you get that high, you get the serotonin high, even whether it's gambling, porn, or drugs, as well as a lot of people that struggle with mental illness. They also are adrenaline junkies. They like to take risks because they get that high, that chemical high.
So that is related to your body. That's inside.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
And some people, they're just born with that. Their brain just doesn't fire enough of that serotonin, and so it's nothing that has happened. It may not be trauma, and may not. It just they were just born that way. That doesn't fire enough serotonin.
So are those the people that have to take the medicine then to make that serotonin work?
Yes. So medication helps with that. It also helps to, there are certain things like medications that also help to rebuild the neurons.
Oh, okay.
And to rebuild, so it does eventually fire on its own. Sometimes I prescribe brain games, is what I call them. So if you spend time doing puzzles and like Sudoku, I can't say that one.
Right. I love that game.
Yeah. So things like that, memory games, your brain is a muscle just like your bicep. So you can rebuild your brain just like you can rebuild your bicep. And so you could do those brain games and it can heal your brain to connect those neurons and to make your brain fire the right chemicals.
So if I do Sudoku, or however you say it,
yeah,
I'm actually going to feel good because I get frustrated.
Well, no, you get frustrated, but that you're working that muscle. You're working your brain.
Oh, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Have you heard of EAP? It's Employee Assistance Program.
I've heard of it. I've never had to use it. I've never treated anybody that utilized it.
Okay. So a lot of our first responders have that through their work. And it only supplies, well, my work supplied us with 6 sessions. But what do you do when you're out of 6 sessions? So I'm just wondering, like, do you think that does that hinder, is that going to hinder the first responder from, I mean, okay, here's my real question. I got to get down to it. Can you, a counselor, do anything with somebody in 6 sessions?
It really depends on the person. However, I do believe that 6 sessions is pretty short because the first session is generally just a consultation and you're getting to know them. And really up to the first 3 sessions, you get to know them on the first. Maybe the second one, you might do an assessment and get to know you. The third one, you're getting to know them, but you're diving a little bit deeper into their issues. So really the first 3, it's not really therapeutic, right?
Right,
so
that makes sense.
I believe 6 sessions is pretty short to say that we're going to get these people completely healed in that time frame.
Yeah. That's what I'm wondering, if like there's something more that managers, or I don't even know where they would, start, but how do they get more sessions? How do they, I don't know. I just don't know. Or maybe that is just to get them set up, with a counselor, and they're giving us 6 sessions just to start with. And then maybe you're supposed to just go on your own. I don't know.
Or I wonder, without having used that, I wonder if they obtained a letter from the therapist saying, do they need more? And if you say yes, then...
maybe if they changed why they were going, like if they had to write down like some code for the insurance to say, okay, well, I was going for this, now I'm going for this, but still really they're doing the same thing. Maybe they can go for 6 more. I don't know. So how long do you normally treat somebody that comes in with anything, PTSD or anxiety or addiction? Like, is there a certain magic number?
There is not. It's really hard to say. Like I say, everyone is different. There's some people I might see for 3 months, 6 months, or up to a year.
Okay. So it just depends on the person.
Yeah, and there's some people I've had that's had some significant trauma for 2 years.
Okay. And that's like once a week for 2 years?
Yep. Once a week for 45 to 60 minutes.
Gotcha. Something that concerns me, because I know you've heard the epidemic of the police suicides that's going on right now.
Yes.
It's absolutely crazy. So the next question I'm going to ask you kind of goes hand in hand with what I'm going to say. I am wondering if these first responders that took their lives did not feel comfortable calling a hotline, if they did not feel
they really did have a safe place to call or go to. All these numbers we have that we can call, all the 800 numbers, the texting numbers, there's safecallnow.org, who I'm also going to have on here. How confident are first responders in knowing, okay, I can actually call that number and my boss is not going to find out, my chief's not going to find out, I'm not going to get called into the office on Monday. So anyway, now I'm going to ask you what a mandated reporter is, because I think it goes hand in hand with what do you have to report, and what can you, if a first responder gets on the phone and says, I don't want to kill myself, but I don't feel like living anymore. That's totally different. So let's go ahead and pick that apart a little bit and explain.
Okay. So when they call a hotline, they can call and not state who they are. So everything on the hotline could be anonymous. So they wouldn't be able to tell their supervisor that, hey, this person called in and said, hey, they want to commit suicide.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. How confident is the first responder in knowing that you don't have their phone number, that it's not popping up on the screen, and then you're triangulating that to their house?
No, they might have that, yeah, but I don't think they wouldn't be able to call in. I worked on a hotline, not a suicide hotline, but like a domestic violence hotline, and they would also often talk about suicide and those types of things as well. We had no access on that specific hotline.
Okay.
So I guess I don't know about the rest of them, but most I think it's all for a hotline anonymous.
So if somebody were to call a hotline and say, I am sitting here with my gun in my hand or my pills in my hand, and I am going to kill myself in 5 minutes, there's nothing you can do. I don't mean nothing you can do. I mean, your job is just to sit there and talk, right? You don't call on the other phone and call 911 and get some.
A hotline is just for them to talk, to make sure, hey, there's someone that is there to talk to. Okay. I don't know the rules on all the hotlines since I'm not in one, but in regards to a therapist, if you're calling in for telehealth, so if you're doing therapy over the phone, so it's a licensed therapist that when you're with a licensed therapist, you have to sign documentation with that therapist. Right. With a hotline, you are not signing documentation.
Oh, that's the difference. Okay.
Yeah. So with a therapist and you're doing it over the phone or via FaceTime or something like that, you still have the paperwork signed, and they sign the confidentiality agreement, which the confidentiality is that we keep everything private unless there's serious potential for you to harm yourself or someone else. So if you or someone else could be in danger, then we would try to either call a support system that they have written down for themselves. So it could be their spouse saying, hey, this person, they're talking about this. You might want to bring them to the hospital.
Okay.
Or we say, hey, we are going to turn this in if you don't go and get further help.
Okay.
So we talk it out with them and tell them, and we remind them of the confidentiality agreement that they signed, stating that I am a mandatory reporter, and as a mandatory reporter, I have to report if a client of mine is going to harm themselves or someone else, and they have the means to do it. So having the means to do it means they have an action plan. They say, I am going to stab myself with a knife, and they actually have knives in their kitchen.
Right. Okay.
I have a gun and I'm going to shoot myself. So they have the means to do it.
So then our first responders should be pretty confident in calling the hotlines, knowing that what they say is absolutely anonymous.
Yes.
No one's going to find out.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I just feel that maybe that's why we're losing so many, because there's nobody to talk to and they don't trust the hotlines. I'm wondering.
I think that, and I think in that type of a position, there are a lot of I don't need help, or if I ask for help and people find out, I'm going to be considered as weak, and it damages my reputation as someone that's supposed to be strong and tough. And
Right. But that's the point of the hotline. If it's anonymous,
Yeah.
no one's going to find out.
Yes, and if they don't realize that it's anonymous, then
Right.
then that's why they don't call us, because of fear of
Right.
not only like the stigma. There's so much stigma with mental
Oh, yeah.
illness.
Oh, yeah. Now, so you've explained mandated reporters, but what about confidentiality? Is that the same in every state?
I think it's pretty close in every state. There's probably very small rules in each state, but yeah, in Iowa, it's basically, I don't. Everything is confidential unless you yourself have given me written consent to tell someone about. So if they want me to share with their wife stuff that we discuss in therapy, I can do that if they have it written down.
Okay.
And so confidentiality is more so like if their wife or their mom called, knowing that they come to me for therapy, called and said, "Hey, I want to know what's going on." If I have a written statement, then then I can talk to them. If I don't, then I can't even say that I treat them.
Oh,
But
okay.
mandatory reporter is the one where it says that if someone has is going to harm themselves or someone else, that's when I have to report. So mandatory reporter is when there's potential for harm. Confidentiality is when someone wants information about their therapy, but I
Gotcha.
can't tell them. The only other instance where I would be able to break confidentiality is if I was subpoenaed in court for specific things that we've discussed. Then I would have to, because I'm subpoenaed.
Okay. With that, we're going to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. Have you ever wondered what being a part of CSI is really like? If so, here's your chance to experience it. In my book, titled Through My Eyes, CSI Memoirs That Haunt the Soul. Through My Eyes contains 11 personal accounts of the most grueling and heartbreaking crime scenes I worked during my 15 years in the Crime Scene Investigations Unit. While reading my book, you'll walk inside the crime scene tape with me. You'll catch a glimpse of what I saw, touched, smelled, and even tasted during an average workday. I'll take you on a difficult journey of memories, uncovering layers of emotional trauma left behind. Dare to join me? Through My Eyes is available now on Amazon. Are you looking for Thin Blue Line gear? It's available on our website at thinbluelineforwomen.com. That's thinblueline, 4, women.com. Show your support for law enforcement and get your Thin Blue Line gear today. Just click on shop at thinbluelineforwomen.com. And we're back with Leah. Leah, do you think mental health counselors are doing enough around the United States to make it seamless for first responders to seek help and not worry about losing their jobs?
I don't know. It's really tough for the mental health providers, actually, with all the rules that we are given. So we are given rules by our licensing boards and our states of what we can and cannot do.
Okay.
I think it really all comes down to is information. The more information we give people, the less stigma there is for people to come up against. And because with the stigma, people just don't want to come forward and get the mental health support that they need.
So we kind of have to make this the norm. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so I interviewed Sergeant Manders a few weeks ago. She is when she was on my podcast, she said something. I try to remember what she said. She said that we're the normal ones, and what we're seeing out there is abnormal. I'm talking about first
Yeah.
responders. So we're normal, but what we're seeing and going through is abnormal. So we need to remember that. Like, we're not abnormal. We're seeing abnormal things and experiencing abnormal things. So of course we're going to act abnormal and feel abnormal. So if we can just try to get that into everyone's head and make it normal, if you will, for everyone to be, hey, this is a crappy call. Let's go talk about it. I mean, just say it.
Yeah.
No one says that anymore. Or I mean, they just don't say it. Just when you get off your call and you're back at the station or around the corner parked in your patrol car or whatever, just say, dude, that call sucked, and talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be helpful?
Yeah. And I think, and as law enforcement officers, I think they probably do discuss calls to some extent, but I think in regards to talking about their own emotions regarding the call, and that's tough for them to express, like, that call affected me in this way. And yeah, that's what we need to normalize, is being able to say we are human,
right?
And this affects me in this way.
Of course.
And being okay with that.
Yeah. What is the big deal? I don't get it. Well, I wrote my book through my eyes.
Yes.
And I struggled with it for a long time. I was writing it because I just wanted to get it out. And I read that when you write something, it uses a different part of your brain. So I started writing. And then all of a sudden I had, little chapters. And I thought, maybe I should publish this. It might help other first responders who are dealing with this same thing. Maybe they'll read my chapters and go, oh yeah, I felt the same thing, or I acted the same way, or whatever. But it was hard to talk about. It was hard to write and to go through, and it's hard for me to reread it. And it's because I feel kind of embarrassed sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, it's normal, it's natural, but it needs to not be embarrassing. It needs to be just like a normal conversation. Like, hey, I stayed up for 3 days crying because of that baby call. What about you? And let it be okay to have that conversation back and forth,
It's as normal as having a heart condition. And we have how many different charities for heart conditions, and people go on walks, and our parents have, we have heart attacks and all that, and people get sent flowers and have meal trains for families that have heart attacks. But if someone is in a mental health crisis, how many visitors does that person have in the hospital, and who sets up that meal train? That doesn't happen when you have a mental health crisis, but it does when you have a heart attack. So that's just...
Gosh, that's so interesting. You're right. You're totally right.
And you don't often know, like, if you're at work and so-and-so had a heart attack, everyone in the office knows, oh my gosh,
of course,
Gary's not at work because he had a heart attack. He's going to be gone for a while. But if they had a mental health episode and they have to be gone for a while, no one knows why they're gone. They just know he's gone, and we're going to have to pick up his work.
It's all hush hush. And
yeah.
So maybe we need to have someone on staff at every single department that's going to head up that meal train and prayer chain. And okay, who's going to go visit today? Maybe every department needs that then.
Yeah. I would think that would be awesome. Another thing is, I don't think there's a lot of education out there, and that includes, our law enforcement. They deal with individuals, calls, that for individuals with mental health, and I have, like I've talked with you earlier about, I have family that are in law enforcement, and they had very little mental health training. And
I think it's a 8-hour day, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And so a lot of the times when they come across someone with a mental health issue, they might think that they're on drugs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Or, intoxicated, and then the person gets arrested. Right. And so they don't have that education. And I think that our first responders need to have the education, not only to serve our public, but to help themselves, because then it becomes more normalized for them. They know that these are the signs and symptoms. They know how and why people get them, and that it's okay that if you are susceptible as a human to get a mental illness.
Right, right. Wow, that's. I'm going back to what you said about the meal trains, and I added prayer chain and having somebody there. That's we really do need. So everyone listening, go back to your departments and try to get these things started. I mean, why not? We can have someone, even if it's not official, it's just an unofficial person that's, hey, if something happens within our, group or our like A shift or B shift or whatever, then you're going to be the one to head that up. I mean, why not? Wouldn't that be great?
Yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah. And then once that started, then everyone would jump on the bandwagon and everyone would start doing it, Hey, this department does it. Why can't we? That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we already talked about confidentiality, and mandated reporter, but is there like a key word or a key phrase that puts you in the position to report? Like what you told me they have to say they're going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else and have the means to do it.
Yeah, there's not like a key phrase, like if everybody says this, then obviously I'm going to turn it in. No, for me, it's if someone comes to me and says, gosh, I just don't want to live anymore. That's not something that I would turn in. It is okay.
Right.
Let's process the feelings and all that, and let's talk about that. Do you have an actual plan?
Right.
So if someone has an actual plan where they say they really, really feel that tonight I think I'm going to go home and I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to do this, then that would be cause for alarm for me to be like, okay, we need to put a crisis plan in place right now. You need to take this home with you. You need to follow this crisis plan. I'm going to call all your supports, that type of thing.
Did you just call them? Because I hear sirens in your background.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what that was.
I added a little sound bite. No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, I would call their supports and be like, okay, he needs to be maybe watched today. Make sure he's not alone. How about you go and you lock up the knives, or talking to their spouses and asking them precautions. Like most therapists, it's not going to be at the drop of a dime. Like if they talk about how they don't want to live anymore, it's not going to be like automatic phone call to 911 or alert, everybody. It's going to be, let's make a crisis plan. Let's talk to your supports and see how they can help you. Let's the tools that you want to use, let's make sure we don't have those in your home for the next few days, and then let's regroup and talk about it again. But if it's a consistent thing, if it's like maybe their spouse isn't going to be home that night, or there's just no supports,
right?
That's when we would ask them if maybe can I drive you to the hospital, and then you can talk to a clinician there. So those types of things. And even if that happened, I wouldn't even know if their supervisor would even be informed. I think that's always a case-by-case basis too, because hospitals are also bound by confidentiality. So it's not an automatic, let's take their gun away thing, but it might be, let's take it, let's put in a plan saying, let's just keep it at work maybe instead of taking it home with you. So there's just less of a chance that it's going to happen. So it's not where you're going to lose your job. It's just making sure you're going to be safe.
Right. Now, last thing I want to talk to you about is, have you heard of the cumulative PTSD that everyone's talking about?
Cumulative?
There's a lot of talk about that lately.
I've heard of the chronic,
okay,
which is the CPTSD.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the cumulative because post-traumatic stress disorder, people think that it's just like one event, but
Hmm.
the cumulative is like in CSI. I saw the same things over and over and
Oh,
over for 15 years. Cumulative,
yeah, that's the same as chronic for
same as chronic, right? Okay.
okay, yeah. So here it's chronic PTSD and it's or CPTSD. And
Okay.
yeah, that would be so PTSD is if there's one initial event.
Okay.
And for PTSD also like you could be watching a news program and you could get PTSD because it's just whatever is traumatic to you. So
Right,
one
right.
person can be watching the 9/11 events over the news and they could uh, get PTSD. But then if
Wow.
someone was a first responder at 9/11 and they were there and then they had to be there the next day and the next day to clean up and see bodies and all that, they
Mhm.
would be CPTSD.
Okay.
Um, so PTSD would be just one traumatic event like a car accident or a death or something like that.
Right.
And CPTSD is more common in like our military that go to war and see things every day. Same with law enforcement, any type of first responder that
Right.
would see something every day or an abuse victim. Those would be CPTSD.
Okay. Gosh, you're so knowledgeable. I thank you so much for all of
No
this.
problem.
So you work in Iowa and you can only
Yes.
see patients in Iowa because you told me that people can call you and schedule a session with you,
Yes.
but they have to live in Iowa, correct?
Yeah, because I'm licensed in Iowa, I can only see patients in Iowa. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say there's somebody listening right now that live in Iowa. How do they get a hold of you? What if they like the, because people gravitate towards, how do you pick a counselor? I don't know. I like the way he looks or I like the way she
Yeah.
looks. First, I mean, I don't want to go to like a guy. I'd rather go to a girl. I mean,
Yeah.
and then they gravitate toward voice and how soft your voice is or whatever. So
Yeah.
like if somebody wanted to call you tomorrow and talk to you, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, there's so many ways to get in touch with me. So my number would be 515-450-9658. I'm based out of Urbandale at 2987 100th Street in Urbandale. I have a Psychology Today profile. So if you go to psychologytoday.com, a lot of people go there to find therapists. I have a profile on there.
Oh, I did not
I'm
know that.
Yeah. Um, and then I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. My Facebook page is kind of like my website right now.
Oh, okay.
um, I don't have a website anymore, but the Facebook page is pretty much the same. You can find my email, my phone number on my Facebook page, which is the Leah Demarest Psych. So Demarest is Demarest.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, give them your name, your full name, so they can find you. Now, how much does it cost to talk to you over the phone? And do they need do you take insurance or is it a
Yeah.
sliding scale or?
So I take insurance. Right now I take the Blue Cross Blue Shield, Villain's Choice, United Healthcare, and Aetna.
Okay.
I'm working on taking Medicaid. If they do not have insurance or one of those insurance, they could give me their insurance if it's not one of those, and we can try to bill, or I can try to become a provider of that insurance as well.
Okay.
If they do not have insurance at all, I would do a sliding fee scale off of their income.
And do they have to supply you with like a pay stub or is it just you just believe what they say?
I prefer to have a pay stub. There has been some instances where that doesn't happen. Maybe
Okay.
they might not have a job.
Okay. Right, right. So if they can't pay, then what do they do? But they're like really, really needing some counseling.
I would there are programs that can help pay. I would have to say in the past I have taken some that I knew were going to be kind of short term
Mm-hmm.
Without cost, but yeah, and there's some people their sliding fee scale was like maybe $6.
Yeah, right. And which
So
is a lot to some people.
yeah,
It's all relative, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Leah.
Yeah.
So thank you. I learned a lot this session. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You
No.
know, I have my master's in marriage and family counseling, but it was a very long time ago. 2003, I believe, is when I got it. And in California, you have to have 3,000 hours. And I did 500 and I said, I'm done. Because I was working 12-hour shifts at the same time. And I was using all my days off to go do my volunteer hours. And I went, I'm never going to get this done. And I was raising my child by myself. And so I literally stopped. But having that degree, I mean, it was like having counseling for 2 years. It was a good degree to get because you learn a lot about yourself. And yeah, it was really good. So you've covered so much today, and I really appreciate your time. With PTSD and anxiety and trauma, it's like our first responders go through so much that, you know, they could be walking around in our departments right now, and they are, and we don't know what they're going through, and it's sad, right?
And they don't even know maybe that they are going through anything, you know. Sometimes it happens, an incident can happen for them, and then it'll take months for them to realize, my mood is changing. This is different. So
Yeah, that's true, because you don't notice in one day. Everyone gets irritable once in a while, right?
Yep.
You're right. And a lot of cops drink alcohol, like a lot. I noticed that when I was in the department, they'd go, you know, the last day they'd all go to the bar, and it's like, what? All right, you guys can drink it in the morning. That's just weird. I'm not saying they all had problems, but there's just a lot of alcohol in.
But that's a social thing to do.
Yeah, totally. So I really appreciate your time, Leah. Thank you so, so much. Now say your phone number one more time for everyone. So in case they would need to get in touch with you.
It's 515-450-9658.
And it's Leah Demarest. Thank you so much, Leah.
Thank you.
Join me next week when I talk with Terry Armenta, the owner and director of Forensic Training Unlimited. We're going to talk about some cool CSI stuff. See you next week.